I've been with Trump, worked with Trump. There are good parts of him. There are bad parts of him. He is human, but there's a collection of activity that's happening around him that are the building blocks of this foundational fascism, if you will. There's levels of authoritarianism creeping in. And what blew me away about your book is that it's human, sir. It happened. Yeah. I'm not here condemning it as much as I am here observing it. It's troublesome because the democracy is cumbersome. Not to use a cliche on you, sir, but we know what Churchill said, it's the worst form of government until you look at the other governments. But there's something that happens where people feel that they need a strong person to come in and flex. They need a person to clear the field for them. And usually it's a person, as you describe in the book, that's able to create that division, able to create that scapegoat stereotype, if you will. I guess the one thing that blew me away, and it always haunts me, is the very ordinary people. Ordinary people can take to this. It's not sadists. It's not fascists. It's not masochists. It's a group of ordinary people that are like frustrated with their lives, or they feel left out of something, or they feel some type of economic desperation. And so they're like, okay, let's wreck it. Let's wreck everything. So
I think that, I mean, that's the other really fascinating thing that I don't think people realize about this, that in 1932, just a few months before Hitler comes to power, there's an election in Germany, and a majority of people in voting for either the communists or the Nazis, that's a majority of Germans in voting for either of those two, knowingly vote for political parties that are openly committed to destroying democracy. So if you just get your mind around that, this is a cultured nation at the heart of Europe, and a majority of people know that they're voting to not have the right to vote again. So, that's not something, I always remember when they talk about democracy building in the Middle East or whatever, you think, oh, well, once it happens, we've put there it is. My God, democracy is fragile. And so what can happen with that is something else, which is really troubling, which is both those parties were violent, the communists and the Nazis. So you find that many people who despise and are frightened of violence, these kind of ordinary people, as you categorize them, they're going to vote for a violent party in the Nazis. And they're going to vote for that violent party because they think that the best way of overcoming violence is to have this violent party deal with the other one and sort it out. So actually, there's a paradox that they're voting for a party committed to violence, and yet they're completely against violence.
I don't know. It's almost like a self-inflicted wound, and you can see it out. People forget this about Roosevelt, but he lived in Germany in his teenage and late adolescent years and read German. And so he heard the speeches from Hitler in German. I think you actually point that out in your last book. And so he knew the trouble that was coming. And so how do you get this? Like, where is the warning sign? Obviously, you could read your book, of course, and you can get it and say, okay, well, there's the warning sign. Those are the 12 chapters of what people do to get themselves in this situation. But where's the light that goes on?
I think that if I look back over the whole of everything, meeting all these people who suffered or who perpetrated or whatever, that as I say at the very end, the overwhelming feeling I have is that people do not understand. They don't understand how inherently fragile pretty much everything around them is. That the huge tendency for people is to be complacent, and we're complacent about our own health. Most of us, we're complacent about our relationships. We're complacent about everything around us. But crucially, we're complacent about the institutions around us. We think that you see these big buildings like the Parliament building or the Capitol building. I mean, I visited America a year before the kind of insurrection. And, we were taken around the Capitol and, there's Washington on the ceiling and that, and you think this is a solid, and I remember looking at the, going round and seeing, one of the original copies of the Bill of Rights, the Constitution, and you're looking at that and I'm thinking, this is the great statement of the Enlightenment. I mean, this is the beacon here. Extraordinary thing to have achieved there. And I could not have dreamed that you'd see people storming that building. Couldn't have dreamt it in a million years. And yet I'm the one who's going around bleating about, oh, everything's so fragile. You know? So it's like kind of, I mean, it's a terrifying situation, I think, because people don't fully understand that. So I think the thing is to be aware of the tiny things when it happens. It's a bit like, you know, what was it, the mayor in New York who dealt with graffiti because it's the first sign, graffiti or broken windows. You don't, you know, and I think it's like that, but with politics. Once you see all these things beginning to happen in politics, you scream and shout about it.
Yeah.
And you're not complacent about it because, you know, Hitler gets 2.6% of the vote in 1928. I've seen reports, Prussian secret police reports, dismissing him as a joke. Yeah, no, oh, what a joke. No chance. And yet, look what happens. So that's the if there's one fundamental thing that cuts through it all, it's that.
Yeah, I mean, so you're sparking so many things in my head. I guess the real thing I'm feeling is some level of sadness because I think, and again, I'm interested in your take on this, but I subscribe to the great man or great woman theory of history. People can move things if they're in the right seat, you know, and he understood this. The reason I find your book so fascinating is I've been with Trump, worked with Trump. There are good parts of him. There are bad parts of him. He is human. But there's a collection of activity that's happening around him that are the building blocks of this foundational fascism, if you will. Now, I'm not going to call it fascism because you're a Brit and Caddy will take my head off. But there's levels of authoritarianism creeping in. And what blew me away about your book is that it's human, sir. It happened. Yeah. It's not. I'm not here condemning it as much as I am here observing it. And then the question I have for you, because I do believe in this single man theory of history, what type of leader can combat this? What type of leader has the skill set? You know, one of Roosevelt's ambassadors said, you know, he had the cunning of a dictator, but he was on the side of the angels. He believed in that democracy. He believed in those parchments that you were visiting.
So, well, I'm just for this new project I'm doing. I'm just been reading again the whole way in which he dealt with the British from 39 through to Pearl Harbor, and it's incredibly interesting because I don't think there's been almost a more skilled politician than him in terms of how he operated. It's quite extraordinary because he keeps kind of vaguely leading Churchill on about whether he's coming into the war in 1940 or not, or back, you know, and the whole way he manages this is quite extraordinary. And I think that the key thing is, there was some quote where he said, I remember something like, you know, you got to be careful because it's a terrible thing to turn around as a leader and see that people aren't following you. You know, and he was completely aware of that actually he needs to take people with him. So he's got an end goal over here. Yeah. And then he's doing his best to manipulate public opinion so that he closes the gap between the goal and where public opinion is, like that. So, but what he never does is say, that's my goal, come to me. He's always just moving along like that. And I think that's the crucial thing that you know, to go back to, I think one of the key reasons Hitler gets to power, which is that there's things that the people want that ordinary politics aren't delivering and democracy isn't delivering. That's the situation above all you've got to make sure you don't have. So if you are a kind of politician in a liberal democracy, you can't go, you know, you can't go around with policies that actually are aspirational out here, and you've got a mass of people back here who simply aren't with you. Because if you do that, there'll be this disconnect, and somebody back here, another, you know, pseudo Hitler, somebody back here is going to lead them, and you're stuck out in the future, and stuck out here.
It's so brilliant, and I'm going to tell you a quick story, which I think you'll enjoy. This is from H.W. Brands' book, A Traitor to His Class, and it's about the 1940 election. And so there he is. He gets wheeled into the radio area of the White House where the microphone is and all the radio tubes, and he's going to broadcast. And it's a little bit of a campaign speech prior to the election, a few days before the election. And he just says, I want to remind my fellow Americans that in this hour of peril, in this time of war, we're not going to war. Okay. Yeah. And then they click off all the radio dials and tubes, and they wheel him back into his study. And James Roosevelt is there, his son, and he's shaking a gin martini in his wheelchair with a cigarette. So, wow, I just told a really big lie to the American people. And James says, what do you mean, Dad? So, I had to do it. He said, I know we're going to war, but they're not ready. And they're going to go, if Wilkie beats me, they're going to go to war anyway. But I want to be the guy that leads them through this war because I love the American people, and I'm going to help them lead them through the war to victory with minimal casualties.